Welcome to my VTOL VR F-45 vertical side deck moving carrier landing tutorial. The side deck vertical landing method is designed for a safer approach for a number of reasons. Number 1, it avoids turbulence generated by the carrier as it moves forward. Number 2, if something goes wrong during the approach, there is less chance the aircraft will hit the carrier. Number 3, there is good separation from obstacles on the deck. Number 4, the pilot has a good clean view of the deck and can judge their speed to match the ship's forward motion. This is how the landing looks in real life. The method I am about to demonstrate is not a military textbook procedure. I do have a UK private pilot's license, but sadly, I don't fly fast jets for a living, so this tutorial is simply demonstrating my method to achieve a safe and controlled side deck vertical landing on a moving carrier. Similar to the procedure you just watched. Before we start the actual approach, let me first explain the 4 key elements on the HUD that I use to judge a visual approach to the carrier. Firstly, the flight path vector. This symbol on the HUD basically tells you where your aircraft is going to end up if you maintain the current, throttle, stick, flap and gear setting. Keeping this symbol just above and to the left of the carrier is where you want to be. Next we have the boresight or waterline symbol and the 0-degree line. This symbol shows the longitudinal axis in which the aircraft is pointing relative to the horizontal. The position of this relative to the 0-degree axis line becomes important once you enter the vertical thrust phase. Having the boresight symbol below the 0-degree line will increase your forward speed. Conversely, having the boresight symbol above the 0-degree line will decrease your forward speed. The airspeed indicator is the final element you need to keep an eye on. With fully forward thrust vector set, obviously you need to maintain an airspeed above the aircraft's stall speed for the current configuration. However, once you set the thrust vector control to 90 degrees vertically down, your airspeed relative to the carrier becomes the important number. The speed of the carrier in VTOL VR is around 30 knots, and once you come alongside you need to try and maintain 30 knots by using the stick to control your pitch, using the boresight and 0-degree line as a reference. I will hopefully demonstrate this technique once we get closer to the carrier and enter vertical thrust mode. There are many other symbols on the HUD. However, they are either not relevant for a visual approach or they provide irrelevant information. For example, your altitude or vertical speed indicator are not so relevant for a visual approach as you can clearly see the carrier. Your flight path vector's position tells you where your aircraft is going and summarizes your vertical speed in any event. In addition, I am not using the VCAP button, which is an autopilot vertical control feature. Personally, I don't like how the VCAP works. So we are about to start our approach to the carrier. We are 12 miles out at 5,000 feet and flying at around 300 knots, roughly lined up with the carrier's track. Call up the carrier for landing clearance. Now that we have been cleared to land, pull back your throttle and start to slow down to around 250 knots. Use the stick to keep the flight path vector just to the left of the carrier and slightly above it. Maintain this naturally descending flight profile and configuration until you approach the 5-mile range to the carrier. The carrier should stay roughly 3 to 4 degrees below your 0-degree reference line in the HUD. As we pass the 5-mile range to the carrier, we need to start thinking about the transition to vertical thrust flight. So, pull back the throttle, letting your airspeed start reducing to the 200-knot mark. As your airspeed drops below 250 knots, lower your landing gear. You don't want to be worrying about this once you get into vertical thrust flight. As we get close to a 4-mile range, set your vertical thrust control all the way to 90 degrees down. This is where you now need to focus on the flight path vector, boresight symbol, and its position relative to the 0-degree line and your airspeed. Firstly, look at your flight path vector. This needs to maintain its position just to the left and just above the carrier. As your airspeed starts to reduce, and in order to maintain the flight path vector just above the carrier, you will need to progressively feed in throttle. It won't be long before you are close to max throttle to keep the flight path vector where you want it. Next you need to bring the boresight up above the 0-degree reference line using your stick. This will slow your speed further. Remember, the slower you go, the more thrust will be needed to maintain your altitude. Judging where to place the boresight relative to the 0-degree line to lower your airspeed will take practice, but you should be aiming to approach the deck from about half a mile out at around the 80 to 100 knot mark. As you get closer to the carrier, you need to keep the nose up to start reducing your airspeed towards the 30 knot mark, but don't get too slow before you actually come alongside. The closer you get to coming alongside means lots of small variances with throttle and stick to maintain your position and relative speed. Once you are alongside and stable, using your stick, gently tilt the aircraft to your right. This will start sliding you over the deck. You will need to manage your altitude with the throttle and relative speed to match the carrier, using small forward and back pitch movements. Once you are over the deck, gently but positively reduce throttle and start your descent onto the deck. Ideally you should touch down in a level attitude, i.e., with the boresight symbol on the 0-degree line. It is normal for quite a hard landing. The undercarriage is robust and has been designed to allow hard landings on a deck. Once down, reduce your throttle to 0, set your parking brake, and take a breath. You've probably been holding your breath for the last 20 seconds or so. Vertical, moving deck, side landings take an enormous amount of concentration. If you want to try this maneuver for yourself, you can subscribe to my F-45 training mission, available exclusively on my Steam Workshop page. Link is in the description below. In this mission, you will be set up on a 15-mile final to a moving carrier. Judge Dredd, over and out.